Michael Cox. I was part of Malaysia 14 from 1967 to January 67 to December 68 in the little town of Papar on the north coast of the state of Sabah in East Malaysia. I was a chemistry major at a college in the Midwest, and during my senior year was very much disenchanted with chemistry, and so the Peace Corps came on campus, and so I made an application. As it turned out, I hadn't heard from the Peace Corps, and come June, when my college finished and I graduated with a freshly minted degree, my draft board was after me, and so I called Washington, and they gave me three options: Peace Corps Colombia, Peace Corps Ghana, and Peace Corps Malaysia. And Ghana would have started the next week, Colombia at the end of the month, and Malaysia at the end of August. And I had no idea where Malaysia was. And I was visiting my brother at the time, and one of his friends was from Hong Kong, and he kept saying, "Take Malaysia." And so I called them back, and I had a spot on Malaysia 14, and the training began on August 31st in Hilo, Hawaii, which of course is where I met new friends and started off on this wonderful experience called a Peace Corps stint. We had our training, and we survived the deselection process, successfully anyway. And we left on, I think it was Pan Am Flight 1 out of Honolulu, Hawaii at midnight on December 15th. And stopped off in, I believe it was Guam, because I remember seeing the B-52s taking off for Vietnam at the time. We landed in Saigon for 2 hours, which was just a mind-blowing experience. Well, seeing the people, the soldiers coming into Tan Son Nhut Airport from up country, and then those going back up country after R&R, and they had the same expression on their faces. It was just a blank, just a total blank, and I was just so moved by that at that time. And of course, this was all new to me from this little Ohio boy that had his first airplane ride from Cleveland to Los Angeles and Los Angeles to Hilo. I mean, that was all new to me. And so being in Saigon, in Tan Son Nhut Airport, and seeing all of this taking place was just absolutely mind-boggling. But we left there and we flew into Singapore from then, and spent a couple days just kind of orientation, and then we flew up to Kuala Lumpur. And in Kuala Lumpur, we had our orientation in country for about a week, and we stayed in a little place outside of Kuala Lumpur called Cheras. And I still remember the aromas that came up, combination of cooking oils and charcoal and diesel fuel. And I remember standing at the bus stops, and I can still conjure those memories, and very, very, very clear smells. And that takes me back to that little bus stop at the bottom of the hill from the college we stayed in. And then after our training, we were on our own, and we just had to be in Singapore by, I think it was the following Sunday, when we were flying off to Sabah. And we all met up, and there were 18 of us who were math and science. Most of the group, I think there was 133 that began training in Hilo with Malaysia 14, and most were English teachers or TOEFL teachers. And there were 18 of us that were math science. And so I think the majority of us went to Sarawak and Sabah. A few went to West Malaysia. A few actually were in university teaching in Penang, especially in the University of Malaysia Science. But we went off to Sabah, and
How many of you went to Sabah? About 14.
I think there were a total of 14, which included English teachers also. But I think in terms of science and math, there were only 3 of us, I believe, 3 or 4. And then we were dispersed to our assignments. And my assignment was 30 miles down the coast. And I hopped on a train and was met at the station in this little town of Papar by an English chap who was going to be my housemate. And he was with the VSO at the time. And it began a long relationship. I still keep in touch with Kevin Carney. And he had already been in Sabah for a year, teaching in this town of Papar, but in a different school. And so he was at the mission school, and I was at the government secondary school. Everything was exciting. Everything was new. Getting used to the food, which I absolutely loved. Getting used to the climate of constant humidity and constant heat. And getting used to the people. The students were fabulous. We taught in English, and so we were taught Bahasa in training, but I very seldom used it, and especially in East Malaysia, there was some reticence at the time of using Bahasa because that was the West Malaysian language. Sabah was very much a British protectorate, a British colony for a while, and so it was very much English oriented. Even taxi and bus drivers spoke English, and so we taught in English, and so it was very easy to communicate. But I think back to the students of having to listen to me where English was a second language, and having to change my conversation to slow down, to explain things more precisely. It was many things that you think back on it and one had to get used to. But it was all exciting, terrifically exciting. You don't think of the impact that you have on these kids. And when we went back to visit them, they all said that the experience of having someone from the outside, someone from somewhere else, telling them about things just lifted their dreams, essentially. Things like that, you look back on those students and see what they become. And you have this little wonderful feeling that you were a little part of that, I think. Or we decided to take a journey with our two children, and my wife and I went back to the village in which we met on our, I believe it was 20th anniversary, 25th anniversary. And we were met by this Pang Cheng Chun who took us around in his Land Rover. And we visited a lot of the places. The town had changed considerably. It had grown, it had modernized quite a bit. But I recall at one point, one of the things I used to do in the classroom with the students, especially during English class, was at the end of the class I would begin reading them stories. And one of the stories I kept reading was the stories of Paul Bunyan, because it was in the Peace Corps book locker. And it was something I could call, I wasn't trained to teach English, kind of thing. And so I brought this out, and so at the end of every class I would spend 10 minutes and read them a Paul Bunyan story. And they of course wanted more and more and more. And so I said, we have to wait for tomorrow. It's kind of like the Saturday morning cartoons growing up, you go to the theater and then it would stop and you'd have to come back the next week to see what happened. And so we stopped at this one farmhouse in the midst of a rice field, and Cheng Chun beeped the horn of the Land Rover, and out came a former student, and he started walking down the path, and as I got out of the Land Rover, he points and says, "Paul Bunyan!" And that was his, and we visited, of course, and had this wonderful time together, just reminiscing about Paul Bunyan and the stories and the classroom things. And he was a rice farmer and doing quite well. But there were little things like that. Went back to the school and walked through the classrooms. And each of the former students who joined us at the time for this tour of the school all regretted that their kids did not have the opportunities that they had with these Peace Corps volunteers that had come in to bring in these new ideas. And about midway through 1968, there was word that filtered down to each of our communities, the fact that a Singapore businessman had opened a hamburger place, a hamburger cafe in Kota Kinabalu. And there was great excitement about that because this was pre-McDonald's, pre-A&W, pre-Burger Kings and all that. And so we were very excited about this. And so my colleague Kevin and I took the train for about an hour up to Kota Kinabalu, and with great anticipation walked into this kind of nightclubish cafe-like structure in the capital, and sat down and ordered hamburgers. And with great anticipation, as I mentioned, what came were kind of like sliders, a very small, kind of like a dinner roll that had been cut in half, and there in the middle was a slice of ham. And that was the hamburger. We should have actually ordered beef burgers, I suppose, but they weren't on the menu. One of the most significant experiences, I suppose you would call it that, one of the most significant things about my 2 years in the Peace Corps was that at my school, a young teacher from Penang, Malaysia, arrived. And she was only there for about 6 to 7 months, but we kind of formed an attraction there, and she became my wife.
My name is Catherine, and I was born in Penang, Malaysia. And after high school, I went to Sabah for relief teaching. It was only just for a couple of months before I entered Teachers College. And it was in this school in Papa that I met Mike, who is a Peace Corps member then, in the school that I was assigned to. It was indeed very, very marvelous that I took the opportunity to go teach there, because I would have never have met him in the first place, and that after 40 years we are here meeting you and your lovely wife and having this recording. It was a marvelous time. Even though it was only a couple of months for me, like Mike, I also found that teaching has been really a very wonderful experience. And we had a wonderful group of students while we were there. And the experience was so meaningful that even after 40 years or more, we have very, very vivid memories and very, very wonderful memories of all our students. We have kept in touch with some of them, and over the years, and that sometimes we would get letters from them, and then now with Facebook, Mike, I think, has contact with some of them. All I can say is that those times in Sabah really were wonderful. We were young and we have lots of ideals, and we really want to help people. We want to to really help in not to impose our ideals on them, but just to be friends with them and to establish relationship and friendship. And I think it has been a wonderful experience being there. Yeah.